Reality, as we commonly refer to it, feels solid, absolute, and unchanging. We point to events, people, and situations as if they are fixed truths, independent of our perspective. But if we begin to look closer, we find that what we call reality is not a singular truth, it is a personal experience, filtered through the lens of our mind. Our thoughts, emotions, memories, and expectations shape this lens, and through it, we interpret what we see. Consider two people standing side by side watching the same sunset. One feels a deep sense of peace, awe, and connection. The other feels loneliness, longing, even sadness. The external event, the sunset, is the same, yet the internal experience is completely different. Because each person brings their own inner world to the experience, their interpretation becomes their reality. This is not just about perception, it's about the very structure of experience. The mind does not simply record what is happening, it actively constructs meaning. A look from a stranger can be interpreted as kind or threatening based entirely on what we assume, expect, or fear. An obstacle can be seen as a challenge or a defeat, depending on how we choose to frame it. And this framing is not random. It is shaped by our habits of thought, our stories, our conditioning. What this reveals is that reality is not an external force that acts upon us without our participation. It is something we help to shape in every moment through our interpretations. When we are unaware of this, we live in a kind of trance, reacting to shadows and echoes of our own inner biases. We think we are seeing the world clearly, but often we are only seeing ourselves projected outward. This is why self-awareness becomes so crucial. If you do not understand your own mind, you cannot trust your interpretation of the world. The same words from a friend can feel supportive or critical depending on your mood. The same experience can bring joy or resentment depending on your expectations. By observing your inner reactions and the stories you attach to events, you begin to see how much of your reality is constructed rather than given. And once you see this, you begin to understand that change is possible. If the way you interpret the world is shaping your experience of it, then by changing your interpretations, you change the quality of your life. This is not denial or fantasy. It is not pretending things are different than they are. It is choosing to relate to reality in a way that brings clarity instead of confusion, growth instead of stagnation, presence instead of reaction. In the midst of noise, confusion often takes root. When the mind is restless, filled with conflicting thoughts, endless planning, unresolved emotions, it becomes difficult to perceive anything clearly. We mistake our mental activity for awareness, but the truth is that much of it is simply distraction. Only when the inner world becomes still can the outer world be seen for what it truly is. Stillness does not mean inactivity. It is not the absence of thought, but the presence of attention. When the mind settles, like a lake undisturbed by wind, what lies beneath the surface becomes visible. Thoughts no longer pull the attention in 100 directions. Emotions no longer cloud judgment. In that silence, clarity arises, not from effort, but from awareness itself. When you are internally still, you stop reacting. You begin to observe. This is a profound shift. Most people live in reaction, triggered by events, conversations, opinions, memories. They are pulled along by the momentum of habit and impulse. But in stillness, you interrupt this momentum. You begin to see the space between stimulus and response, and in that space you find choice. This inner quiet is not something that arises automatically. It must be cultivated like a garden. You must sit with yourself, breathe consciously, allow your thoughts to come and go without chasing them. Over time, the mind begins to settle. You start noticing what usually goes unnoticed. The tightness in your chest, the judgments that arise without cause, the small voice of fear or doubt that colors your actions. As awareness sharpens, confusion begins to fall away. From this place, your vision of the world becomes more accurate. You are no longer projecting your internal noise onto others. You see people as they are, not as your emotions make them seem. You understand situations with less bias, less urgency. Even conflict appears different, not as something to be avoided or fought, but as something to be understood. This is clarity, not a cold intellectual understanding, but a quiet knowing that comes from presence. Inner stillness also sharpens intuition. The mind no longer shouts over the subtle guidance of your deeper self. You begin to trust your instincts, not because they are emotional, but because they arise from a quieter, more grounded place. Decisions made in this state are not rushed. They are deliberate, centered, and rooted in awareness rather than fear. This clarity doesn't come by force. It comes by letting go of mental clutter, of inner resistance, of the constant urge to control. In the stillness, you no longer try to shape everything. You simply observe, and in that observation, a different kind of power emerges, one that sees what is rather than what is imagined. Every human being is born with the capacity to choose. It may not always feel that way, especially when circumstances seem overwhelming or when life appears to corner us into a single path. But even in the most difficult conditions, the space to choose still exists. It may be small, barely visible, and easily missed, but it is there. Within that space lies the foundation of power. Choice does not mean the ability to control what happens. Many things are outside your control. The actions of others, the passing of time, the arrival of loss or change. But what is always within your control is how you respond. Your response is your choice, and it determines not only the direction of your life, but the shape of your character. Reaction is automatic. Choice is conscious. One keeps you bound to habit. The other sets you free. Often people underestimate the power of small choices. A single decision to pause instead of speak. To listen instead of defend, to act instead of procrastinate. These are not grand, dramatic moments, but over time they build a life. Each choice creates momentum. Each one strengthens or weakens your integrity. The more consciously you choose, the more aligned your actions become with your values, and the more influence you have over the unfolding of your reality. Choice also brings responsibility. To choose is to own your path. It is easier to blame others, to point to the past, to say, I had no choice. But this is the mindset of powerlessness. True power begins with the willingness to look inward and ask, what part of this is mine to own? It is not about guilt or self-blame. It is about reclaiming the authority over your own life. In every moment you are shaping yourself. You are either choosing growth or comfort, honesty or avoidance, discipline or ease. These choices may not show their effects immediately, but their impact accumulates. Like water carving stone, your daily decisions define who you become. And over time, the reality around you begins to reflect those choices. Not because the world changes on its own, but because you have changed the way you move through it. There is power in the realization that you are not stuck. You may not be able to change everything, but you can change something, and that something matters. Even the choice to observe your thoughts rather than obey them, or to take one small action in the direction of your values, is a statement of power. It says, I am not merely a result of what happens to me, I am an active participant in what I become. At first glance, discipline and freedom seem like opposites. Discipline suggests structure, rules, repetition, perhaps even restriction. Freedom, by contrast, evokes images of spontaneity, movement, and the ability to do as one pleases. But when observed with clarity, discipline does not limit freedom. It creates it. It is the foundation that supports true, lasting liberation, not from external conditions, but from internal chaos. Without discipline, the mind becomes a slave to impulse. Whatever emotion arises, it obeys. Whatever distraction calls, it follows. There is no stability, no direction, only reaction. In such a state, there is no freedom, only the illusion of it. One becomes a prisoner of habit, pulled this way and that by desire, fear, boredom, and resistance. The absence of discipline does not lead to a life of ease. It leads to a life of disorder, where the present moment is constantly sacrificed to temporary comfort. Discipline is not punishment. It is not self-denial for the sake of suffering. True discipline is an act of devotion to what matters most. It is the conscious decision to align your actions with your values, even when it is uncomfortable. It is the choice to do what must be done, not because you are forced to, but because you understand its necessity. This creates a deeper kind of freedom, the freedom to live in integrity, to trust yourself, and to move through life with purpose. Daily rituals, whether in movement, silence, study, or service, anchor the mind. They train it to endure discomfort, to remain steady, and to act with intention. Over time, discipline sharpens your awareness. It reveals where your energy leaks, where your time is wasted, and where your efforts are scattered. With that awareness, you can redirect your focus. You become the one steering your life rather than being tossed about by every changing mood or circumstance. There is also a quiet confidence that arises through discipline. You begin to witness your own strength. Each time you follow through on what you said you would do, you build trust in yourself. That trust is power. It frees you from doubt, from hesitation, from the constant back and forth of indecision. You stop waiting for the right mood, the perfect timing, or external motivation. You simply act because you have trained yourself to act. What many people seek through freedom, peace, clarity, fulfillment are not outcomes of avoiding structure. They are the natural results of living in alignment, and alignment cannot be sustained without discipline. It is the vessel that holds your highest intentions. It is the quiet repetition of effort that transforms thought into action and action into embodiment. Suffering is often misunderstood. It is seen as something to be avoided, something unfair, or something permanent, a kind of life sentence handed down without warning or appeal. But suffering is not a punishment. It is not a flaw in the design of life. It is a signal. It carries a message, and beneath its discomfort lies the potential for transformation. Pain, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, is the body and mind's way of drawing attention to something that requires care, reflection, or change. Just as the body uses pain to indicate injury, the inner self uses suffering to signal misalignment between values and actions, truth and pretense, need and neglect. When you feel deeply unsettled, it is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that something is calling for your awareness. Many people resist suffering. They distract themselves, suppress it, or blame others for it. This reaction is understandable. Pain is unpleasant, but in avoiding the pain, they also avoid the message it carries. The discomfort remains unresolved, resurfacing in different forms: restlessness, anxiety, anger, fatigue. It doesn't disappear. It waits patiently to be heard. To approach suffering with openness instead of resistance requires courage. It means being willing to sit with what hurts, not to indulge in it, but to listen. Where does it come from? What belief is attached to it? What part of you has been ignored, silenced, or misunderstood? These questions are not always answered quickly, but the willingness to ask them is the beginning of inner work. Suffering also strips away illusion. When comfort is taken away, you are left face to face with what is essential. False identities fall apart, attachments become visible, expectations lose their grip. This can feel like loss, but it is also clarity. It creates the space to rebuild, not from who you think you should be, but from who you truly are beneath the noise. Some of the greatest shifts in life are born from suffering, not because pain is noble, but because it reveals what has been hidden. It humbles the ego, it forces you inward, it shows you what matters most. And if met with presence rather than avoidance, it becomes a doorway, not a wall. Suffering is not a sentence. It does not define you or confine you. It is a signal that asks you to stop, look deeper, and begin again from a place of honesty. When you meet suffering with awareness, you begin to change your relationship to it. It no longer controls you. It teaches you. It shapes you. It becomes the beginning of healing rather than the continuation of harm. What you experience as the outside world is never truly separate from your inner world. Though it appears that events happen independently of your thoughts and emotions, your interpretation of those events, your response to them, and even what you notice or ignore are shaped entirely by your inner state. Your mind does not passively receive reality. It filters, colors, and reshapes it through the lens of your current state of being. A peaceful person walking through a chaotic environment may still move with steadiness and clarity. Meanwhile, a restless person may find stress and conflict even in moments of quiet. It is not just the world that defines experience, but the mind that meets the world. When your inner state is one of confusion, fear, or resentment, the outer world appears threatening and unstable. When your inner state is grounded, attentive, and calm, the same world offers insight, opportunity, and connection. This principle is not abstract. It plays out in daily life. If you hold anger inside, you tend to perceive others as aggressive or disrespectful. If you are consumed by fear, the future seems uncertain and hostile. But when there is stillness in the heart, life unfolds with a different rhythm. You become less reactive, you see more clearly, you notice beauty that previously went unknown. The world begins to reflect your inner balance rather than magnify your unrest. This does not mean ignoring difficulty or pretending everything is perfect. Life brings pain, conflict, and uncertainty to everyone. But how you relate to these challenges is not determined by the challenges themselves. It is determined by what you carry inside. Inner tension amplifies outer problems. Inner openness allows for new responses, and through those responses, your experience of the world begins to shift. To change your reality, then, the work begins within. No amount of external control can bring lasting peace if the mind is chaotic. No relationship, job, or possession can create stability if the heart is filled with doubt and fear. You may seek answers outside of yourself, but again and again, the path leads back inward. The questions become, what am I holding on to? What story am I telling? What emotions are shaping my view of others, of time, of self? When you take responsibility for your inner state, you begin to reclaim your power. You no longer wait for the world to become peaceful in order to feel peace. You cultivate peace within, and through that your actions, your presence, and your decisions begin to shape your surroundings in subtle and profound ways.